Good afternoon and welcome. We're delighted to have you with us today for another event that's part of the Nelson Initiative on Ethics and Leadership at the University of Florida. You will notice I am not Pat Reeks, the interim dean of university libraries. He had an emergency and was not able to be here, but I'm Judy Russell, the former dean of university libraries, so I know many of you. And I extend warm greetings on Pat's behalf and on behalf of the entire library administration, staff, and faculty. And the Smathers Libraries are delighted to present today's event in partnership with our colleagues from the Australia Space Institute. Recognizing his personal and professional contributions to Florida and to his country, an endowed fund has been established at the George A. Smathers Libraries to honor former U.S. Senator Bill Nelson and to support his initiative focused on ethics and leadership. The endowment also fosters research and scholarship through the use of Bill Nelson collection, Senator Nelson's personal papers and professional papers and memorabilia that are on deposit with the Smathers Libraries. The program this afternoon is especially exciting as we welcome to Gainesville members of the crew of the Space Shuttle Columbia STS-61C mission. 40 years ago today, they lifted off on the 7th mission of the Space Shuttle Columbia with then Congressman Bill Nelson on board. We're honored to have them with us to celebrate this milestone reunion, and in a few moments, I'll turn the microphone over to Senator Nelson and the crew and their families that are with them for a thought-provoking conversation on ethical decision-making before, during, and after their mission. We're also delighted to have with us today the interim president of the University of Florida and several other colleagues from across the campus who wish to extend their own welcome and some brief updates on research and scholarship occurring in their areas. It's now my honor to introduce and welcome the interim president of the University of Florida, Dr. Donald Landry.
Thank you, Judy. And good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure and an honor to welcome students, faculty, staff, members of the space community, and with special welcome, the crew of the STS-61C spaceflight. Looking through some records in advance, and I'm sitting in front of experts, so I may be exposed with faulty information, but well over 100 crewed missions, and only once did a U.S. president actually attend a liftoff. The hazard was too great for them to attend. Many professions entail risk to human life, and every interaction of humanity with technology is fraught with danger. But crewed spaceflight crystallizes such risk to brutal clarity as years of preparation culminate in the tension of countdown and liftoff, only to be matched by reentry and landing. Leadership forged in such an environment is leadership indeed. Technical mastery, raw courage, integrity are all called upon. And as the bleeding edge of science and engineering answers yes to the question, can we? The response is really, should we? Or most pointedly, should we now? The tension of making the decision at the moment. This 40th anniversary of the flight of STS-61 is a reunion of American heroes. It is also an opportunity for us at UF to continue the realization of the vision of one former U.S. Senator Bill Nelson of the great state of Florida and past NASA administrator. The vision, the Nelson Initiative on Ethics and Leadership. The interplay of tension in the accomplishment of a task with lives at stake calls into play ethics. Critical ethical questions abound. The The combination of leadership and ethics also brings up the issue of moral authority. And I must say, astronaut as NASA administrator is the strongest possible rejoinder to the question of where does moral authority come for something like manned spaceflight. And thus we are especially honored, we at UF, we are especially honored to be the repository of the Nelson Archive so that others can learn from the leadership and the ethics, the decision, and the moral authority that was exercised at various points in American history. So thank you all for coming, and I can't wait to see parts of the show, and a round of applause for our American heroes from STS-61C.
Early in the morning hours of Sunday, January 12th, 1986, Clarence and Nanny's son, Bill, took his seat in the middeck of the Space Shuttle Columbia. As the voice of Mission and Launch Director Gene Thomas filled the cabin, Bill focused on the pre-launch checklist. The 6 prior launch scrubs were completely forgotten. In a profession where there are no errors, no margin of errors, focus was everything. And when the temperature outside reached 51 degrees, the final approval was given. And at 6:55 a.m., 8 million pounds of thrust lifted 7 suns of this planet 212 miles into Earth orbit. And over a lifetime, Bill Nelson has served in many distinguished roles. He's our own native son, Florida Blue Key, Florida Legislature, the United States Congress, the Florida Cabinet, and the United States Senate. But no role has brought him greater pride or earned him greater respect than his service as a crew member of STS-61C. His name forever etched alongside his fellow astronauts. The crew's 6 days in orbit represented a culmination of years of sacrifice in service to humanity's enduring urge to explore. In just 10 days, 10 short days after the Columbia touchdown, that drive was shaken with tragedy as Grisham, White, Chafee had gone before. The names Scobie, Smith, Onizuka, Resnick, McNair, Jarvis, and McAuliffe were forever etched into our memories. Having flown the final mission before Challenger, Bill later reflected, quote, "Well, why was I spared? I still don't have the answer to that," end quote. Sir, I believe that the last 40 years has answered that question. Bill Nelson was spared to be a keeper of the flame, an ethical leader, a guardian, a critic, a caretaker of human spaceflight, a voice respected because he had truly been there. He played a key role in the Challenger's investigation and later worked the following of the loss of STS-107 aboard Columbia. In every role, he pressed for accountability and safety, while never losing sight of the need to move forward, because moving forward matters. As his fellow payload specialist Bob Sanker once said, "The desire to explore isn't learned, it's in your genes." So we remain in awe of those who have ventured outward on our behalf, especially Bill's fellow Gator alumnus, Dr. Rob Furl, seeking answers to questions that cannot be found on this earth. So ladies and gentlemen, the entire Gator Nation, we salute those who have had the courage to go beyond the horizon and to forge a path with no limits. welcome.
As the Vice President of Research at the University of Florida, I have the privilege of supporting an amazing cast of faculty, students, postdocs, staff, as they create new knowledge for future generations. That knowledge will be used in biology, in engineering, to explore better cures and treatments for disease, and to explore beyond our planet here. One of the great responsibilities in doing that attaches itself to the integrity of the work that we do, of the viability of the ideas we put forward, that we have tested and retested those ideas. Occasionally, we have the privilege to glean insights from those who went before us, those who have been authors of such wisdom and have depended upon the integrity of those, many of those that they haven't seen before, as they put their lives on the line to explore where we only dream of going with them. Today is such a day. We have really titans from our field here with us to share with us some insights on how leadership and ethics are so intertwined together as we make progress as a people, as a planet, as a nation. I want to thank those participating here for giving of your time, particularly so with Senator Nelson, who has tirelessly served our state, served our nation in a way that was remarkable, honorable, ethical, and impactful. And it is a privilege to be here today to participate in an event that bears his name. So with that, I want to welcome, and I look forward very much to hearing the wisdom that they're going to share with us today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's such a privilege to be able to address an audience that has people in it that quite literally help us define and understand what is possible. As astronauts, you work in an environment where the margin of error is slim, where practice meets uncertainty, and where the decisions by an individual can have ripples of consequence of significance. So in that sense, you're not just explorers of space, but you are inherently leaders and practical leaders for us all to observe and learn from. At UF, we teach about leadership. We talk about it in the sense of decision-making, communication, teamwork, and those are all fine principles. But as you're well aware, it's more than that. It's I think President Landry mentioned it, it's about a moral authority. It's about not just making a decision that works, it's about making the right decision. And making the right decision when no one else is looking, and making the right decision when it has significant consequences. Ethics, in its most basic form, is about responsibility. And I think that's something that you're all very aware of. Responsibility to your crewmates, responsibility to the people you're with, responsibility to the public, responsibility to our future generations who will have to inherit the decisions that are the consequences of our actions. And competency will buy you authority, but it's the moral character and ethical leadership that will sustain that authority. So on the behalf of the University of Florida and the Herbert Wertheim College of Engineering, just want to welcome you and thank you for being not just explorers of space, but great examples of leadership, and ethical compass for us all. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Weiss. I'm the manager for Deep Space Logistics at the Kennedy Space Center. Privileged to be here today and share a glimpse of the extraordinary work happening at the Kennedy Space Center. I've got to share a first unique point though. Listening to all the inspiration that everybody's setting up for today, I was inspired to get into this field by watching a movie that had naval aviators, you know, probably all know what movie that is, maybe graduating from classes of Top Gun. And just eating lunch before coming in here, got to hear from one of my former bosses, that's an administrator of this crew, one of two administrators of this crew, about how Senator Nelson has spent a lot of time pulling this team back together to have reunions and discuss. So today on the first day of class, you all that made a decision to take some time out of your day and come here are gonna get that inspiration that I got through cinema in person and understand the importance of teamwork and leaning on each other and helping one another that this crew and their partnerships, you know, help made happen. So with that, I'm gonna show a video because that'll be better than me talking, give you a little glimpse of what's happening at the Kennedy Space Center, and then I'll give you a couple more points after that. So play the video, thank you.
Liftoff of Artemis 1.
So for more than 60 years, NASA has pushed the limits of human ingenuity and exploration, from Mercury proving human spaceflight was possible, to Apollo's daring journeys to the moon, and decades of science aboard the International Space Station. This agency has always looked beyond what we know to imagine what could be, advancing knowledge for the benefit of all humanity. Last year, from the Kennedy Space Center, we had 109 total launches. Looking back the year before 61C, I think we had about 18 from Cape Canaveral. The environment has changed dramatically. Today, inside the historic vehicle assembly building, the Space Launch System and Orion spacecraft stand fully stacked on the mobile launch platform. Soon the VAB doors will open, the crawler will come to life, and more than 5 million pounds of rocket will make its slowly, steady journey to the launch pad for a wet dress rehearsal, the final critical test before the Artemis II launch. Artemis marks a new era of American deep space exploration and humanity's next chapter beyond Earth. Building on the legacy of those who came before, Artemis will return humans to the moon to establish a sustained presence in deep space, enabling us to live, work, and learn farther into the universe than ever before. This is an extraordinary undertaking and one we cannot achieve alone. Artemis succeeds through collaboration with international and commercial partnerships and, equally important, academic engagement. As we expand our capabilities, the demand for innovative technologies grow. Kennedy recently celebrated several breakthroughs developed at our Space Center, advancements that will perform in lunar environments ahead of human missions. Those achievements represent years, even decades of research and development. Just this morning, the agency released a new agency technology priorities call, asking for universities, companies, all to respond to that and help us prioritize what works for us, the needs we have that align with needs that you're looking to do research in, that will align with industry and technologies and commercialization here on the Earth as well. So encouraging all of you to go look for things like that and find ways to collaborate with us. Take inspiration that you get today and bring that passion that you have to what we're doing in exploration of space. Every milestone begins with curiosity, ambition, and people willing to answer the call. As we stand on the brink of writing the next chapter of history, we honor those who built the legacy and those who will carry it forward. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Seidler. I'm the director of UF's Australia Space Institute, and I will spend about 10 minutes with you as a prelude before the main event. I am going to highlight a few of our faculty today that are leaders in space research. And in part, I mean they are leaders because their science is incredibly impactful, but I also mean that they are leaders because they help pull others up along with them. They demonstrate ethical leadership, and I'm going to give you a few examples. And if Dr. Furl and Dr. Paul could please stand up and wave. I'm going to start with them. I know many of you know these two IFAS professors. Their work is incredibly fascinating. They have been all over the world and, in fact, out of this world to study plant genetic adaptations to extreme environments. They also have grown plants in lunar regolith soil, and their work has been recognized in many different ways. But they also do so much to give back to their research community. They lead future directions. So for example, Rob Furl led a National Academy's decadal survey on biological and plant science in space. This sets the tone for the next 10 years of research in this field. Annalisa Paul has been past president of the American Society for Gravitational and Space Research, and she's currently co-chair of a National Academy's panel on human exploration of Mars. And so she's helping to shape plans in that area as well. Dr. Furl was the founding director of Astraeus. He's been an assistant vice president at the University of Florida as well. And Dr. Paul is the director of UF's ICBR. So they both do so much, not only in their research, but to lead others and to give back to our research community. Because they have been highlighted, I think, quite a bit in the past couple of years for all the cool things they're doing, I'm not spending quite as much time on them. Today, I want to highlight 3 people that you may not know quite as well. The first is Professor Rafael Guzman, who's a professor of astronomy at the University of Florida. Professor Guzman could not be here with us today because he's representing the University of Florida in Spain at a GTC program meeting. This is a special telescope in the Canary Islands in Spain, and this is a collaborative effort between Spain, Mexico, and the University of Florida. Yes, I just said University of Florida in the same sequence as 2 countries. He's really done a lot to lift up the profile of UF. He is also the principal investigator of the Arrakis mission, which I will tell you about in a moment. This is a 250 million euro mission. He is also the founder and former chief technology officer of Satlantis Microsats, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as well. So the Arrakis mission is focused on imaging halos of galaxies. And the mission will do this at a very low brightness level, which allows us to access unprecedented information about the evolution of galaxies. But more importantly, Professor Guzman is creating incredible opportunities for trainees and young scientists to get their feet wet in the field on what will be a very high profile and important mission. He also, again, is a founder of Satlantis and the former chief technology officer. And I think this is just the coolest idea that he came up with one of his colleagues, which was to, instead of point telescopes at the sky for imaging our solar system, our universe, he's using that same technology to image the Earth. And he is doing so at a level of spatial resolution that is comparable to the best systems out there at a fraction of the cost. This is a company that started with UF Innovate and is now an international multi-site company. And they currently are working on a proposal for something called Florida Sat, which is a Florida satellite that they would hope to have circle over Florida 3 times a day. And again, the spatial resolution is such that they can identify citrus greening on a single tree in a citrus grove so that the farmers can go in and treat it and prevent it from spreading. They can also identify people who might be in need of rescue after a disaster, such as a hurricane or a flood. So this is someone who's not only conducting amazing science himself, but he is doing things to benefit young scientists and to benefit all of the people in Florida. The next person I want to highlight is Dr. Siobhan Malani. Siobhan, could you please stand up and wave? There she is. Siobhan is an associate professor in the College of Pharmacy at the University of Florida. She joined us in 2018 after a career in biotech in California. And Siobhan's work is really revolutionizing healthcare by working on in-space biomanufacturing. She leads the University of Florida's In-Space Biomanufacturing Innovation Hub. So let me tell you a little bit about Siobhan. Siobhan is looking at taking small bits of muscle tissue, putting them on a chip, and sending them into space. You can see that, back. You can see that she has been doing this for over a decade. And what she has found is that putting these muscle tissue chips in microgravity causes the tissue to age faster than it would on Earth. And so she can set up these tissues in little microfluidic chambers and flow different kinds of anti-aging or anti-atrophy drugs across them in space. So she is dramatically shortening the drug discovery and drug testing timeline. But she is also doing many things to enhance the careers of other faculty and trainees at the University of Florida. So a couple of years ago, she received a $1.5 million investment from UF President's Strategic Funding Initiative. She puts on an annual symposium for in-space biomanufacturing, which I have been to. It's an incredible collision of companies, faculty, scientists, policymakers. It's a great meeting. She also has given away $600,000 in seed funding to UF faculty. She has impacted 20 different labs with this seed funding, and she has helped to develop new cross-college collaborations on campus. These seed fund grants then led to these faculty members being able to leverage that and obtain new funding from the NIH, the Air Force, and the Space Research Initiative. She also is funding future flight research for faculty at UF. So she is funding 6 teams who will fly their experiments with LEAP in early 2026. She is also funding 3 to 4 teams with Swiss partners on parabolic flight in September of this year. And she has submitted an ISS resource request, which is pending, with 4 teams of scientists. So again, she is not just conducting her own research, but rather she's actually creating a collaborative ecosystem with benefits for University of Florida researchers, students, companies in the ecosystem in the state of Florida, and benefiting the healthcare industry as well. So thank you, Siobhan. And the last person that I would like to highlight is Professor John Conklin. So could you please stand and wave? And if you want your lab, I see a lot of folks from your lab here too, if you want to stand up. Thank you. So Professor Conklin has been at the University of Florida for approximately 15 years. And during this time, he has garnered an astounding nearly $50 million in research funding. And as evidenced by the students here, he supports a large ecosystem in his laboratory. He has roughly 20 people that are graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, project managers. He also supports 20 engineers working at aerospace companies as well. He has received all kinds of fellowships, distinguished professorships, and awards, and he is sought after for his expertise, including NASA has invited him to serve, and he has been member and vice chair on NASA's Astrophysics Advisory Committee. He has also been member, vice chair, and chair of the NASA Physics of the Cosmos program. So he is advising NASA in these areas on the future directions for research. I'm just going to highlight a couple of his projects. Obviously, he has many. One is a $13 million award where he is the principal investigator. This is the Gravitational Reference Advanced Technology Test in Space. So they have developed sensors to measure at a very precise level gravitational changes on Earth from space. And we can use this information to track things like movement of tectonic plates, of ice, and we can really learn more and study Earth's systems by measuring these nanometer, very tiny scale gravitational changes from space. So another project that he's working on is called LISA. This is the Laser Interferometer Space Antenna. This is a huge international partnership involving NASA and European Space Agency and investigators all around the world. This is to build a really fascinating system. It's 3 different spacecraft that you can see in this triangle. They will be thousands of kilometers apart from each other. They will pass lasers back and forth. And John's lab is working on the charge management device. You can ask him to explain that later. But basically, what they will be able to do is measure gravitational waves and small disruptions in gravitational waves. And this will allow us to better understand the beginning and the evolution of our universe. Really incredible science. And in this award so far, it's still ongoing, has brought in $19 million in funds to the University of Florida. Now, I say it is still ongoing, but that actually was not a given about a year ago. You all may know that the NASA budget proposal about a year ago had a science budget cut of almost 50%, and LISA was not included in that budget. But Professor Conklin, as you can see here, along with other U.S. colleagues that are working on the LISA project, made multiple trips to Washington, D.C. They spoke with 20 representatives and staffers about the importance not just of LISA, but of other basic space science. And I'm really happy to be able to say that just a week ago, January 5th, with the new proposed budget, LISA is its own line item. So this is someone who's out there advocating for science, maintaining his team and his people, and doing a really excellent job supporting UF research. So with that, I will close. Hopefully that whets your appetite a little bit to hear much, much more about ethical leadership, and I'll turn things back over to Judy.
Thank you all for sharing those insights with us. I think it is helpful for us all to get a sense of the breadth of the work that's being done here. And it's now my privilege to welcome and introduce Senator Bill Nelson, who will moderate and guide our panel discussions. As already mentioned, he's a native Floridian from Miami, and he has devoted his entire life to public service. He attended the University of Florida before continuing his education at Yale University and receiving a law degree from the University of Virginia. From 1978 to 1991, he represented Florida in the U.S. House of Representatives. He then returned to Florida and served as Florida's treasurer, insurance commissioner, and fire marshal in the 1990s. He was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2000, serving until 2019. Most recently, as you heard, he served as NASA administrator from 2021 to 2025. Senator Nelson is a great friend of our university and the George A. Smathers Libraries, and we're honored to welcome him and his crew and their wives here today from the Columbia mission. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Bill Nelson.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, for 40 years plus, these folks have been very special to Grace and me. And the surprise that we have for you is that we have included our spouses because as you look back over 40 years, our spouses are very much a part of this journey. I'm going to tell you about each one of them. I want to point out at first, we have another University of Florida graduate in the audience that is another astronaut commander. And I'd like for you all to say hello to Commander Andy Allen. He received a graduate degree here at the university. I also want to point out, in addition to Judy and the Dean Emeritus of the law school, John Mills, who is here, who got me into all of this. And because of I'm learning something about politics when I got into university politics. And I found out that's the fiercest kind of politics. The university politics would not consider an institute, so we concocted this idea of an initiative on ethics and leadership. And thanks to Judy and to John, they focused it at the George Smathers Libraries. And I'd like you to meet Senator Smathers' son, who was my college roommate, introduced me to my wife, and I introduced him to his wife, Susan, who I understand is here, Bruce Smathers. Now, to talk about these people, I just want to set the table for you because this is a rather incredible group of folks on this stage. Our commander, who is in the center, Hoot Gibson, Robert Gibson, had a pilot's license before he had a driver's license. And that led to the life of a naval aviator, 85 times entering all the flak over North Vietnam off of an aircraft carrier. Top Gun, which was mentioned here, test pilot, and brought him to the first Space Shuttle class in NASA, the class of 1978. Always up to then, astronauts had been white males, originally only a certain height and weight, because you remember the Mercury capsules that John Glenn shimmied into. And in 1978, that changed. And there was a direct NASA policy that changed it. And it included 6 women and 3 African Americans and a Pacific Islander. A diversity of the astronaut corps, which today has led to an astronaut office that is and looks like America. And along with Hoot in that first class was his now wife, a medical doctor astronaut, Dr. Ray Seddon. Hoot has flown 5 times. Ray flew 3 times. And to Ray's left is our pilot in the class of 1980. Now, listen to this pedigree. He grew up in segregated Columbia, South Carolina. He had always wanted to go to the Naval Academy. His dad was the football coach. His mom was the librarian. They hammered education into him. But when he applied to the Naval Academy, you had to get a nomination from your congressional delegation. And the South Carolina delegation in 1964 would not nominate a black student. There was a fellow that was tasked by President Johnson in the Department of Defense to go around the country and find promising minority candidates for the Naval Academy and for the other academies as well. And he found Charlie and married Charlie up with a Chicago congressman. Charlie goes to the Naval Academy and is promptly elected president of the freshman class and alternates the class president throughout the 4 years with another fellow who became a 4-star admiral. And so Charlie flies 100 times for the Marines. He chose the Marines and aviation after graduation. 100 times over Vietnam, comes back, continues his naval career, his Marine career, and applies to the astronaut office. After, he goes back in, active duty Marines. Now, this is significant about Charlie Bolden. He's a colonel, and he's passed over by the General Review Board. And he says that the Marines and the Navy have done so much for me. I want to give back. And I would ask you to extend my tour so that I can go back and be the top Marine officer at the Naval Academy and give back to them so much of what they gave to me. And the next time that review board met, they promoted him to general. And look at Dr. Franklin Chang Diaz. Listen to how he got here. With $50 in his pocket from Costa Rica, his dad had given him a one-way ticket. He comes to live with distant relatives in Hartford, Connecticut, not speaking a word of English, and goes and gets an assistant's job at a library in a black and Hispanic neighborhood of North Hartford. And as a result, he starts to learn English by reading to Hispanic kids an English story and interpreting it in Spanish for them. And that's how he learned English. And a high school principal and a high school teacher saw his promise, and they gave him a break and let him enter high school, of which he's, of course, excelling in physics and chemistry and mathematics, but, of course, English literature, that was difficult for him. Anyway, he gets a full scholarship to the University of Connecticut, and from there is accepted into MIT and is a plasma physicist. And some of you might wonder, what is plasma physics? It's not about blood plasma. It's about the plasma that on that symbol of our space shuttle in that picture is we're coming through the hot heat of re-entry, and that's the plasma that is surrounding the spacecraft. And Franklin, as a doctor, not to be outdone, finds Peggy. And Peggy Chang Diaz, working at NASA in Houston, and then after their marriage, she decides she's going to become a medical doctor. The remaining person is my rock, who has taken us all through these 40 years, who got together our family and all of our guests, including our son, Bill Jr., who is here today, and goes out to the Space Center 5 times as we go to the pad. 4 times we're strapped in, ready to go, and for one reason and another, the mission is scrubbed, and we come back out. Of those 4 scrubs, if we had gone on any one of them, we would not be having this discussion today. But the 5th try, an almost flawless 6-day mission, and then these astronauts, including Ray Seddon, went on to have these illustrious careers. In the process of 40 years, we have grown to love each other. We have become friends. When you go through an experience like we've gone through, it's a unique experience that very few humans have, to be able to see Earth from the perspective of up there. And to see, by the way, that there are no political borders. You can't see R's and D's. You can't see racial divisions. You can't see religious divisions. As you orbit the Earth every 90 minutes, you see home. And home is the planet. And you start to realize that we are something, a part of something that is much greater than we are. And that's this shared experience that we have. So I want you to meet these people, and I want you to see why each of them, the spouses included, are leaders of exceptional integrity and display the qualities that we are trying to get across to students. What do you want to model yourself after? Is it a celebrity, or is it a famous person, or is it this or that? Maybe it's the quiet person who never gets anything done publicly, but is doing it very ethically. So I want to start off with our commander, Hoot Gibson. And somewhere in the course of the discussion, I want you to share some of the harrowing experiences that you had, particularly on your third space flight, whether you didn't know if you were going to get back alive.
Yeah, where do we begin? Harrowing experiences. We had a great many of them on this mission. We had a number of close calls. We had someone watching over us on many of those close calls. Bill referred to 5 times going to the vehicle before we launched. I don't know if anyone ever went more times than that. And we actually scrubbed 2 countdowns in one day. So we actually had 6 scrubs leading up to finally getting to go to space. And it was an interesting launch. My first mission was aboard the Challenger. And let's see, I guess I was the only member among us who had flown once before. It was the first flight for Bill. It was the first flight for Franklin and the first flight for Charlie. But I had flown aboard Challenger on my first mission not quite 2 years before. And all the way to space, nothing went wrong. And of course the pilots, Charlie amplify this as well, we are so keyed up for a malfunction to occur because there are some malfunctions that we have to solve within 10 seconds or the vehicle's going to be destroyed. And so you're really keyed up for the launch. Well, my whole first launch, nothing happened except for the launch. And next thing you know, we were shutting off the engines at 17,500 miles an hour. And I'm going, hey, that was 50% of my training, and I didn't have to do anything. This launch was not that way. 61C was not that way. And approaching the top of the launch tower, the launch gantry, we had our first systems alert that had to do with one of our electrical buses, one of our essential buses. And then immediately after that, we had indications of a serious helium leak on one of the main engines. And so here is Charlie Bolden on his first launch over on the pilot side of the orbiter, the side of the orbiter that frequently got referred to as a snake pit, because he had all the electrical buses, he had all the hydraulic systems, all of those things to manage. And Charlie, under 2 Gs of acceleration and more on his first launch, has to manage a helium leak, a procedure for a helium leak. And if he had missed one switch, he would have caused us to lose that engine, and we would have been into some kind of an abort, either an abort right back to the launch pad or an abort across the Atlantic Ocean. I was so impressed the way he handled this. And on his first launch, he was right on top of it every step of the way. And that was one of our adventures. Charlie got to do the same thing on the return, the reentry and landing. We had an issue going on with one of our hydraulic power units that was using excessive coolant water. And Charlie had to manage that by turning the water spray boiler on and off during the course of the reentry. Oh yeah, I was there. And so were you. Yeah. Anyway, so we had those adventures in the course of this mission, and Bill mentions all the times we went to the launch pad. We tried to launch on December the 19th, 1985. We got down to 14 seconds to go, and I happened to be looking right at the countdown clock as it went 14, 20 minutes. And I said on the intercom, guys, we just scrubbed, because there was something wrong with one of the booster rockets, an electrical malfunction in a booster rocket, and the computer said, you're not launching with this, and so it canceled us with 14 seconds to go. We tried again on January the 6th, and fortunately we didn't launch that day because it had been a circus of errors during the countdown. Because of a misconfiguration on the launch pad, we had dumped overboard 20,000 pounds of liquid oxygen out of the external tank. And the 3 shuttle main engines are burning liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. If we had launched like that, we wouldn't have made it all the way to our orbital speed. I don't know where we would have wound up. We might have wound up in a high-speed abort into Africa somewhere. There were other issues as well, but we didn't launch that day. We scrubbed the second countdown on January the 6th because the satellite customer realized that our airborne relay aircraft, when they heard we scrubbed the first time, they turned around and went back home. And the satellite customer said, no, you can't launch without them. We've got to have them. So we scrubbed the second launch. We came back on January the 7th, 1986, and the weather was no good anywhere on our across the ocean abort sites. Morocco, Spain, Africa, any of our abort sites were socked in. We couldn't launch that day. January the 10th was really exciting. We climbed into Columbia in the middle of a raging thunderstorm and sat there on 4.5 million gallons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, listening to lightning going off around us. And every time we'd get a lightning spark, we would hear static in our headsets. It was close enough that it was inducing a voltage in our headsets. And finally, Mission Control had mercy on us and said, okay, guys, we've come to realize we're not going anywhere today. Let's get you out of the orbiter. We did not argue a bit. So, but then, January the 12th, the stars all lined up. Everything was looking really great. The weather was beautiful everywhere. And I remember thinking, this can't be happening. Is it really going to happen? Oh, we did have one funny thing. We decided that Steve Hawley, who couldn't be here with us today because he and his wife are caring for Steve's ailing and aged mother. Steve Hawley, we decided, because of his experience on his first mission, he was a jinx. And so what we did was we put him in a clever disguise. We put a nose and glasses on him, and we put duct tape over his name tag so that Space Shuttle Columbia couldn't read his name tag and realize it was Steve Hawley. And that worked, because we launched that day. So that proves he really was the jinx that kept us from launching.
So I want you to get back eventually to that other harrowing coming home with your right wing shredded. But let's go to Charlie. And Charlie, now we were rookies on Hoot's flight, the 61C, and then you go on to command several flights. Tell us the difference between being pilot, PLT, and commander, CDR.
When you're the pilot, you're the worker bee, as Hoot said, because you've got all but environmental control system and the data processing system. So I say that partially in jest, but also because that's just the way it is. And the pilot works extensively with the 2 mission specialists behind us. One in the middle, we became became known as the flight engineer. It was mission specialist number 2. But he or she, that person had the best view of everything in the cockpit that meant anything, all the gauges and all that kind of stuff. So it was imperative for the PLT to work with MS2 to kind of scope out anything. We were incredibly fortunate on our flight because we had a guy by the name of Dr. Steve Hawley who had a photographic memory. And Steve, it was almost impossible for the training team to ever baffle Steve with a failure because he looked at the indicators and he was able to put, you know, a failure of that bus, that indicator or whatever, and say, oh, we just have a so-and-so, so that we could work on it that way. But that was what I did as a pilot. As the commander, you're responsible for the vehicle, the crew, and the mission. And so you work with the flight control team, you work with the trainers and setting up the training curriculum, if you will, for the crew that we're going to carry out and getting us ready to go fly. I don't know about Hoot, but both times I was a commander, I met with the lead flight director before we launched to kind of set some ground rules about little things. One of those things for me as a pilot was selection of the aim point when you come back to land, because it's a glider. You need to understand that. It's the world's largest glider, so there is no go-around capability when you come back to land, and that's actually essentially the only time that we physically fly the vehicle unless we have a rendezvous or something like that on orbit. Hoot did when he rendezvoused with the Mir space station and with the internet. I think, did you do ISS also? Okay. But so my discussion with the flight director was about selection of aim point when you come back. If you have any wind up down the runway, that's good, but you don't want too much wind down the runway because, again, you're a glider, and if it's too much, you're not going to make it, you potentially are not going to make it to the runway. So we had a close-in aim point, far-out aim point to get you to the runway. And engineers have a tendency to worry about running off the other end of the runway. Pilots worry about getting to the runway. And so they were very prone to always want to pick the nominal aim point, the one that was farther away, so you wouldn't run off the other end of the runway. And we'd had a couple of instances in training where they had put us on the nominal aim point when the winds actually were higher than computers said, and we ended up just making it to the runway. So I had a kind of a, Bill likes to say, come to Jesus. Had a meeting with the flight director to say, okay, let's not embarrass any of us. If we get to the point where the wind's over 5 miles an hour down the runway, I'm going to the close aim point because I don't want to not run off the runway. So that's the kind of stuff
I got
that
another question for you. So one of the most endearing things when Charlie was nominated to be administrator, and we're having the Senate hearing on Charlie's confirmation, and a fellow astronaut commander, Duffy, testifies to our committee, says Charlie Bolden is the most extraordinary leader of people that I have ever run into in this astronaut's case in all of my Air Force years and all of my NASA years. Now, Charlie, what is it that is that leadership that you were able to achieve, not only at NASA and those kind of accolades, but then to go on back into the Marine Corps and rise to the level of Marine Major General?
It's pretty simple. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. I was privileged to have a mom and dad who were both teachers. My mother was a librarian. My father was my high school football coach. And all my life, they had taught my brother and me several things. One is treat people the way you want to be treated. And the other thing, the cardinal rule around my house was always take care of your people. Every single one of us in this audience has somebody for whom you're responsible. You may be the official leader, or you may be the accidental leader, but you're responsible for somebody. So what I learned from my mom and dad was always take care of your people. Ironically, when I got to the Naval Academy, the one lesson, well, they taught you a lot of lessons, but one of the foremost lessons was take care of your sailors. When I got into the Marine Corps and I went to the basic school, take care of your Marines. And so that was just ingrained in my head. So my number one rule of leadership is take care of your people. If you're worried about yourself, you're probably not going to do very well because you're going to do things for you to the detriment of your people. And when you need them to support you and the team the most, they may or may not be there. So it's a pretty simple thing for me, and it was just instinctively kind of, ingrained in me by my mom and dad.
Okay, Franklin, now you started out virtually penniless, going to a completely alien place that you had always respected. Obviously, you were extremely talented, but how did you get over that threshold to know that you wanted to put yourself into a very uncomfortable situation where everything is new, and if you're going to make it, you've got to help make it?
Well, let me give you a little bit of a perspective. When I left Costa Rica, I was 18 years old. I had already graduated from high school, and I had been working in a bank, and I had saved enough money, and my father gave me a one-way ticket to the United States. And the reason he did it this way, primarily because we didn't have enough money to afford the return flight, but he would have done something to get it. But he said, if I give you that return ticket, you will be, right back, to the side of your mother, because my mom was, took care of me. So, and my father was very strict and wanted me to be tough. And he said, I don't want to make it easy for you to come back. Now, if you do get into a lot of difficulty, and you find that it's impossible, just write me a letter, and I'll find a way to get you back. Of course, we both knew that it would take a few months for a letter to get there, and then of course a few months for a response, and I have to say that if I had had that return ticket, I would have used it. I would have gone back. It's just as simple as that. It was really hard to come to, the US was, this is 1968. The US was an extraordinary place. It was where everything was happening in the world, all the changes, social changes in perspective and music, and also the country was struggling with a lot of issues. Almost it seemed like it was tearing itself apart, but at the same time, it was a welcoming country. It was alive. It was the next year, humans landed on the moon. Extraordinary. Yet that year when I arrived, they had just killed Martin Luther King, and Bobby Kennedy had been assassinated. There were racial disturbances. I was in Hartford, in Connecticut. So it was, to me, it was almost like a mix of something that was explosive, that had to do something that told me this was the place to be. And so that's kind of what kept me going. I didn't really have any kind of assurance that something was going to work, but I knew that I would just take one step, and if it worked, then I could take the second step, and then the next step after that, and it was just that. It was just a collection of steps, never knowing whether I was going to get to the destination where I wanted to go.
And who is now one of the world's experts on fusion energy, is developing a plasma rocket that we desperately need in order to be able to take humans to Mars. And if Franklin's rocket is perfected will get us to Mars in 39 days instead of the 8 months that it takes in chemical propulsion in today's technology. All right, I want to start bringing in some of the spouses. Hoot, I'm going to flip it to you, and I want you to talk about Ray and what will happen, and ask her whatever questions you want to ask her.
Talk about pressure. Well, Ray, what was it that started you on your journey to being an astronaut?
I think it's when I first found out that girls, women, could be astronauts and got to fly in space. And, you know, that was a thrilling thought for a small town girl in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And just the thought of being able to do something that was so exciting and so much more difficult than what most of my other friends were doing. You know, being a little girl growing up in a small Tennessee town, people thought you didn't get to do many exciting things. But I always thought that there was going to be something out there that was going to be special, that I could contribute to the world of science, to my community, for my friends, for my colleagues. And, you know, I think growing up, you always hope that you always are going to have a good life, a lucky life, a fun life. And, you know, you always hope that someday you're going to find a nice man.
But she had to give up at some point.
But luckily...
Had to settle for this one. Yeah.
Luckily, I met my husband. And, you know, we've had some wonderful years together, and we hope we will have many more. And
what about your dad? Did your dad steer you at all in that direction, or did he encourage you or help make that happen?
I was lucky that I had a father that encouraged me. And he was a wonderful man, took me all over Europe, took me places that I thought I would never get to see. And so, you know, I was always hopeful that I'd have a life like that. And luckily, I've had a good life. And, you know, I think a lot of it has to do with the people that you have in your life, people that are able to help you, and people that you are able to help. And so, you know, those are the sorts of things that people hope will happen in their lives.
What about you told me a story about 1957 and Sputnik? Of course, we pronounce it Sputnik. In Russia, we pronounce it Sputnik, which actually means little traveler in Russian. But your dad actually showed you Sputnik going by, didn't he?
He did. I can vividly remember the day. And my father said, "Ray, come out in the backyard. You need to see something that is truly awesome, that you will always remember." And that's one of those things that you never forget. And so, you know, I think that you always have to encourage people to have moments like that for your children, for your friends, and for the people that have helped you along the way.
And your dad said, okay, this is an artificial satellite going by. At some point, there will be people up there in space. And what you told me was that you asked him, do you suppose I could do that as a girl? Did he say, nah, girls can't do that? Did he say that? What'd your dad say?
No, he absolutely did not say something like that. I had a great dad.
Well, and when Ray graduated from medical school, she finished high school, finished high school in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And so every one of her graduating class, I think, went to college somewhere in Tennessee or Kentucky. So where did you pick to go to college?
the University of California at Berkeley.
Berkeley. Berkeley in the 60s. Holy smokes.
Oh, golly. It was a crazy place. Crazy, crazy.
Well, and I think she must have grown and evolved a lot in the course of that. And then after that, it was medical school. And her dad offered her a gift for graduating from medical school. And, you'd think, well, how about a new car or, something like that? What was it you wanted for your graduation gift for graduating from medical school?
I'm not sure what the question was or how to answer it.
It wasn't that long ago.
Well, luckily my dad gave me my private pilot's license. And, that was just the beginning of incredible things that I got to do. And, I think it's wonderful when your parents realize that there's something special out there for their child, and their child wants to be able to do those things that they're very interested in doing. But it's great to have parents that will realize that their children want to have a successful, happy life, and that they can pass that along to others as they go on with their lives.
And I think that played a large role in her selection as one of America's first 6 women astronauts, because NASA interviewed a lot of women. NASA interviewed a lot of female doctors. I'm not sure they had that very many female doctors who also had a private pilot's license. So little things like that come back to help you years later. So that's how Ray got to be there. And we met in 1978, and 3 years later was when she asked me to marry her. She loves it when I say that. I'm going to have to sleep on the couch tonight, I can tell.
Okay.
I asked her.
Yes,
Franklin, did Peggy ask you to marry her?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm going to be in the couch anyways. Yeah.
So tell us about you all and ask Peggy some questions.
Well, I'll let her, Peggy. Peggy, I'll let you tell the story, maybe, of when we got married and all that. We just took a lunch break and we went and got married.
No. What was the question?
You're on.
I don't even know where to begin. No. I went to work at NASA in 1981. I was getting my computer science degree. So I was hired by Ford Aerospace, and I worked on the programs for the simulators that trained the astronauts.
Pull it up close to you now.
So that's how I met my husband. The first week I was there, we were introduced, and so that was kind of the beginning.
Tell us about his program.
Oh, well, right away when he figured out that I was a computer science person, he was having trouble getting his program to work, a Fortran program that was, what was it doing? It was calculating your rocket exhaust.
Yeah, I was doing some calculations in the Livermore supercomputers in the Lawrence Livermore laboratory, using in those days it was called the ARPANET. It was the beginnings of before the internet, and there was a way to communicate through the phone lines. And I had a little terminal in my office where I could command those big number crunchers to do plasma simulations of the exhaust of the rocket. But the program wouldn't work, and I was frustrated. And it's been like a month I couldn't get the damn thing to work. And so over to Peggy here.
So I went to his office and looked at the program. It was not too long, about a page or two long of code. And I found the error, which was in the right statement, which was a syntax error, which was really no big deal. But after that, he asked me on a date.
So Peggy, now you're in a position, as looking back over these 40 years, your husband has been to space more times than anybody else, save for one, Story Musgrave.
Jerry Ross.
Jerry Ross. So the two of them, Franklin included, have been to space 7 times. You're the spouse, and you're enduring all of this, and at the same time, raising children and in a medical practice. How have you handled the stress?
Well, you can see I got the gray hair, and he got all the fun.
So it's rather extraordinary because the spouses take on all the pressure that their husbands have, while the husbands, in this case, our crew was all boys, and we're over there having fun, and the spouses are wondering if we're going to come back. So 5 times to the pad, how did you handle that, raising 2 children at the same time and playing hostess to all of the family that kept coming down time after time after time? Tell us about it.
On the first launch try, we had about 25 buses of friends and students and family to be there to support us and love us through it. And after the 6th try, we had enough friends to put into a taxi. But I pretended like I was a big girl. Because, well, Billy and Nan Ellen Billy was at 4th and 5th grade. And I also think that we all kind of stuffed the fear. And we kind of had to pretend. But then 10 days after they landed, then it all hit the fan. And it affected the nation, and it certainly affected our crew. And we talk about it every time we're together. And Challenger launched and blew up 10 days after this crew landed. They had trained together. They were the 2 crews that trained together, and we fell in love with each other's families and loved them. And so it hit all of us very hard. And it still, when we talk about it, it still brings tears. So you have to pretend like you're a big girl. But at the house in Melbourne, I could call the Space Center, and they would connect me to the shuttle. So that they wouldn't let me talk to them. And this is what y'all experienced too. I couldn't talk to them and distract them, but I could listen to what they were saying. And but then they're still paying me off for not telling what I heard. But I want to tell you a couple of things about Bill that you'll never know. When he came back from this flight, 6 days, 200 miles above the Earth and 17,500 miles an hour, it wasn't long before he said, as a boy, he had a dream in his heart to fly. But he thought, how in the world would that ever happen? It's just impossible. Even if we could fly in space, how would it happen to him? And I'm saying this to the students in the room and then the older ones of us who are still students too. I want the students to dream, because we had no idea how it was going to happen. When Bill got to the House and got on the Science and Technology Committee, and then was elected by the Space Subcommittee, that he would be the chairman of the committee over those his senior. That doesn't happen. It's all by seniority, and from that position he was asked to fly. So I just want to say to you students, dream, because we've experienced a life of miracles. And so we believe in miracles, and we're still dreaming. And then I want to tell you just two other things, and I'll be quick. This is an initiative on ethics and leadership. And I read a book, and right now I can't say the author's name, From Good to Great, What Makes a Good Leader a Great Leader. Some of you are nodding, so you're familiar with it. And he studied leadership among the leadership of our nation and corporate CEOs for 35, 40 years. And this is what he said: the most important characteristic of a leader is humility. And I just want to draw you two pictures of what that looks like in Bill's life. And he'll probably say, Grace, don't, but I'm going to tell you. When he was served in the Senate, and this life of public service has been the most incredible privilege for us. But he chaired the committee when his party was in power, and then Kay Bailey Hutchison would be the ranking, and they'd flip back and forth. She was from Texas, and we loved Kay Bailey. And that was in the days that your best friends could be those on the other side of the aisle. And it was actually a wonderful thing, because friends solve problems, enemies don't. And so they had been trying to pass a very significant piece of legislation that would determine the future of space for the next 20 or 30 years, and the cooperation of public and private space partnership. And they finally passed it. And so he came home 2 days later, and I said, the newspapers, it's all over the newspapers, and I watched the television today, and they were all covering it. And when I read the newspapers and saw the interviews, you gave every bit of the credit to Kay Bailey. And so, being the wife, I said, Bill, you're the one that flew. You're the one that has more knowledge, and, you know, your heart is so much in it. Some of you are nodding, you wives. And so I said, couldn't you have just taken a little bit of credit? And he said, no, Grace, it's what makes government work. So again, to the students, remember that. You give credit to the other person. And we don't see that a lot today, and I think that's one reason why government is not working very well. And then my last little story for you. He came home one day in the latter years of his years in the Senate, and he said, he called him by name, the senator that we were always good friends with, and just loved him and his wife and his two girls. And so what he said, he came home and he said, you know, lately, the last few months, the senator has just had it out for me. He's saying things, and there's just great stress in our friendship. And so he said, I don't know what to do about it. So he said, I think I'm going to call him tomorrow and see if I can't go see him. We're talking about humility. So he comes home that night, and he says, well, I went to see him today. And I said, well, tell me what happened. And he said, well, I called him, and he said, sure, come on in. And he went and sat down in his office, and Bill said, I have always valued our friendship so much. Our relationship is the thing that is important to me, and I am here to apologize to you and to say, I am sorry for whatever it is that I have done that has offended you, and I don't know what it is. And I want you to tell me so that I can learn from it and so that I can apologize further for it. And this senator sat there and he said, Bill, this is my 4th term, 6 years to a term, to serve in the United States Senate. I have never had another senator come to my office and apologize to me. He said, I'm the one that's the jerk. He said, I want to apologize to you. And he said, your friendship is valuable to me too. I've always loved Grace and you and the children, our family has. And I am so sorry there is no problem between us. So don't ever worry about it again. But it's in the spirit of humility that Bill went in. And so I think we see such division in our nation today. And if we could ever see a little bit more of that, we might be better off.
All right. Hoot, how do astronauts have humility?
That's what I was sitting here wondering. I was speaking at Space Camp. I've been speaking at Space Camp over the last 8 years, very, very frequently. And I was there to speak to the state teachers of the year, 50 teachers, each one of them being the teacher of the year from their state. And I did my talk about flying jet fighters, about graduating from Top Gun, test pilot, astronaut, and all of that. And at the end of it, I was answering questions. And one of the state teachers of the year raised her hand, and she actually stood up and she said, where is the arrogance? I was expecting a lot of arrogance. And I said, I hope somebody would shoot me before they would ever say he's arrogant, or he's conceited, or he's stuck on himself. And I think that's one of the good characteristics about a leader is that you're not sold on yourself. You have got humility, and anyway, that's how I feel about it. Yeah, so it actually has no place. Now, we've all seen the movie Top Gun, right? So we know what fighter pilots are like. That's what we're like. Arrogant, cocky, self-assured. No, that's not a good part of the package. So leave that behind.
So students, the mark of a leader is you give the credit to the other person, and when something goes wrong, you stand responsible. The leader is the captain of the ship. If something goes wrong on the ship, the leader has to take the responsibility. All right, I want us to start looking to the future. And up there is a big space station now. It is as long from one goalpost to the other on the football field. That's how big it is. And there are at least 7 up there, combination of foreign astronauts, American astronauts, Russian cosmonauts. They are doing incredible science. Some of that we started way back 40 years ago. We were doing the forerunner to a lot of those experiments that are going on right now. And then it was these professional astronauts, these 4 sitting right here and Andy Allen back there, that then prepared with the space shuttle this truck that you could put this 45,000 pounds in the cargo bay and take up components and start to assemble them into the space station. But before that, we had to get ready to do it. And the Russians ended up with the first space station, and then they put up a second space station. And then they worked it out where we would send our space shuttle to their space station called Mir, and we would dock and live together as the forerunner to the Russians and the Americans building the International Space Station together and then operating it together. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the only cooperative project today between the government of Russia and the government of the United States because of the adventurism of Putin in Ukraine. That is the only cooperative venture between the two governments, is the International Space Station. These folks, including Andy, are the ones that assembled that. But guess who the Russians insisted as the first commander of the space shuttle to come and dock? They wanted somebody that they trusted and that had the capability to do it. It was Hoot Gibson. Tell about that, Hoot.
Well, yes, it's a long story, but I'll try to make it quick.
Make it short, because we got to get on to the future.
Well, I was chief astronaut at the time that it was time to assign the crew to do the very first docking ever done by a space shuttle, and it would be with the Russian space station Mir. And as the chief astronaut, one of the fundamentals of leadership that I always tell people when I'm giving a talk on leadership, you are there to take nothing for yourself. You are to share everything with your men and women that work with you and work for you. You're not there to take anything for yourself. I had been asked years earlier, now that you're chief astronaut, are you going to assign yourself to the Mir docking flight? I said, absolutely not. Well, now it's time to assign the crew. I picked a really good crew for it, and the director of flight operations called me and said, Hoot, they really like your Mir docking crew. And I said, great, because I put a lot of work and effort into it. And he said, with one exception. And at that point, I was a little annoyed, because in 2 years of being chief astronaut, not one of my crews had been messed with. Who knows them better than me? So I didn't know what to say, and he said, they want you to command it. Well, I fought it for about a month, because I've been telling the world for 2 years now that I'm not going to steal that mission for myself. But I wound up having to do it. And I found out after the fact that the Russians were nervous. And the reason they were nervous is that we had done the first American-Russian docking 20 years earlier, the Apollo-Soyuz docking. And we actually did 2 dockings. One was a practice docking, and one was the final one. Deke Slayton flew one of them, and that was his only trip to space. And the other one was flown by the mission commander, Tom Stafford. And in one of those dockings, we hit them so hard we almost broke the thing. And now, 20 years later, here we come with our $500,000 space shuttle, $250,000 space shuttle to attack their station. And so the Russians were nervous. And so what I found out later was that NASA headquarters was telling the Russians, hey, look, this is so important to us, we're sending our chief astronaut to command the mission. Now, this is all kind of self-serving sounding, but that's how it happened. That's how it actually happened. And it was a pretty fascinating experience. My crew and I trained in Russia 2 times, all together for a total of about 20 days. We had to learn to speak Russian, because the Russians couldn't speak English and they couldn't afford English teachers or English textbooks. So we had to attempt, underline the word attempt, to learn to speak Russian, because I are an engineer, and engineers ain't taught good in English, let alone in Russian. And so it was a bit of a struggle, and here's what I know best in Russian. Я говорю по-русски очень плохо и понимаю ничего. I speak Russian very badly and understand nothing. But we needed to be at least conversational. Well, having fought it initially, it was the most exciting mission that I flew because of the degree of difficulty. We had to merge Mission Control Moscow with Mission Control Houston. All of our checklists had to be in English and in Russian, and it was a really challenging flight. It came off just about perfectly. And that was because of the great crew that I had assembled to do that mission without me. But it still went off well, even though they put me on it. So anyway, it was a really big success.
So because of the success of that, naturally, it led to more and more cooperation, more and more collaboration, and the eventual building of the space station. So we have a 3-minute video, and I want to bring you up to date. What is happening now, 200 plus miles above the Earth every day, as it orbits the Earth every 90 minutes. Can you roll the video?
The International Space Station isn't just a symbol. It's a powerhouse of cutting-edge science, constantly revealing secrets that defy Earth's limitations and drive us farther into the cosmos.
Our mission is research and science. We have experiments mounted on the outside of the station that are looking at Earth. We study our own bodies and how they react to space, to weightlessness, to radiation. And that helps not only us go on further in future missions, but also helps for medical research back home. And then we study lots of different things as well, like materials, combustion, all sorts of things that help us understand life back on Earth.
Yeah!
Microgravity doesn't play by the rules. It flips them upside down, transforming how liquids flow, how flames burn, and unraveling biological mysteries before our eyes.
I saw some heart tissues beating in space, and it was incredible.
So Tom, we see that top one beating. Looks like happy heart cells.
But we're not just along for the ride. We're explorers, diving headfirst into the challenge and harnessing the power of this unparalleled platform, just as we have been for decades. We're on a relentless quest for answers, seeking to understand the intricate workings of the human body in space and ensuring future crews stay safe on their daring journeys beyond Earth's orbit.
The human aspect of human space exploration is always going to be very important for decades to come.
And when it comes to technology, we're not waiting around. We're discovering new ways to grow crops in harsh environments and engineering innovations to tackle Earth's greatest challenges.
We have amazing technology that allows us to recycle water and create water for us to drink. It's delicious.
Microgravity isn't just a curiosity. It's a game changer in the fight against diseases back on Earth, paving the way for breakthroughs that benefit us all and enabling new economic opportunities in space.
Welcome, Axiom 3 on board the International Space Station.
From our vantage point more than 200 miles above Earth, we are not just spectators. We're gaining unprecedented insights into the world we call home, and we're sharing our findings openly. We're not just achieving results today. We're sparking inspiration in future generations of explorers and embracing the power of global collaboration as we reach for the stars.
What was your favorite experiment on the International Space Station?
Toby, great question. My favorite experiment was the one that I got to eat. It was us growing hatch chili peppers in our plant habitat.
Station Huntsville on 2, we have video in Node 1. Look at those chili peppers.
And as we soar through space at 17,500 miles per hour, each moment is a step closer to unlocking the mysteries of our Earth, our universe, and propelling our pioneering spirit even farther into space. So come along for the ride aboard the International Space Station.
There's already been one stellar development on the space station. Back when we flew, we were doing experimentation with growing protein crystals in space, therefore outside of the influence of gravity, and to grow them larger and more pure. They have now advanced that research to the point that they are manufacturing drugs, and in the case of Keytruda, the drug that has been so effective against several types of cancers, originally it was administered through an infusion that took hours. They have, through this zero microgravity research on Keytruda, they've been able to distill it so that they can give it, as we speak, much quicker, within the matter of a half hour, 45 minutes. But they are even perfecting it where they can give it as a shot, and therefore so much more accessible and easy for the patient. And that's a direct result. And these are the guys that prepared the way. Now, we're going to talk about going back to the moon and going on to Mars, but there's one thing that's unique also about these astronauts, and I refer to them as these astronauts because they are the professional full-time astronauts. When you live in that high-risk environment, you will notice, and you've seen it here already, they have a sense of humor. That humor is therapeutic. It breaks the tension. And I'm telling you, this crew of 7, especially led by our commander, we were laughing the entire time. And that, for you students, is an application of a leader too, to make your followers feel at home and easy. And humor can often do that. All right, let's go to Mars. Hoot?
Good idea. I was going to say one more thing about what you just mentioned, Bill, and that was when I would sit down the first time with a new crew, I was the first person to command 4 missions aboard the Space Shuttle. But each time I'd sit down with a new crew, I would give a little speech. And that little speech was, we are going to experience something extraordinary. And however, we are going to live or die depending on how we perform our task on this mission. And we have the ability to kill ourselves. It isn't flown by mission control. Mission control actually has no control. It's all on board by the crew. However, having said that, if we're not having fun, we're doing something wrong. And I would say that every time. So we should be having fun doing this, or else we're doing it all wrong.
Because of self-incrimination, I would not dare tell you some of the pranks that we pulled. I will tell you one. The first launch attempt was December the 19th. It was scrubbed. But that meant we were going to be on orbit Christmas Eve. So our commander, who is always up to something, and was going to pull something over on the NASA management. So they got another astronaut, Sonny Carter, and dressed him up as Santa Claus and swore him to secrecy. Then they got a television photographer, a video photographer, and swore him to secrecy. And we all snuck into the simulator with Santa Claus. And they even had a black string tied across the crew compartment where a Christmas package went down the black string and it looked like it was floating, and we're there doing this like we're in 0G, and it looked exactly like we were on orbit. And had we been on orbit Christmas Eve, Hoot was going to send this video back to Earth and let them try to figure out how we got the 8th guy up there. So shall we go to the moon, back to the moon, and maybe to Mars?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I want to show you the rocket that's going to, in a month, the earliest launch attempt is in February. This is it. This is called the Space Launch System. That was the one that we launched a couple of years ago, uncrewed, so that we could check out the rocket and the spacecraft. It's called, and the name, by the way, 50 years ago, it was Apollo. Guess what? Apollo in Greek mythology has a twin sister named Artemis. And so this is the Artemis program going back to the moon. And by the way, after this next one that's going to launch, they're going to circle the moon, check out the spacecraft, and then the third, Artemis 3, is going into lunar orbit. They will climb into a SpaceX lander. They will go down to the surface. 2 will stay behind. 2 astronauts will go to the surface. They have to stay there 6 days because of the lunar orbit of Orion, the spacecraft. And as long as I was administrator, it was going to be the first woman and the next man to walk on the surface. And we will see who the crew is that they pick in another year or so. The long and short of it is, this is the rocket, and it performs so well. Now, show them the crew that in a month is going to launch. There you go. In the center right is the commander, Reed Wiseman, a very respected astronaut. To his right, our left, is the pilot, Victor Glover. Both of them F-18 Navy fighter pilots, both veterans. To Reed's left is Christina Cook, an engineer, a woman who has had more spacewalk hours than any other woman. Christina Cook. And then rounding out the crew of the 3 Americans is the first foreign astronaut, Canadian Royal Air Force F-18 pilot, Jeremy Hansen. That's the crew. You couldn't do better out of central casting. So, what do you all think about going back to the moon after a half century? Why don't we go to Mars first? I'll throw out that provocative question.
I think it's the right thing to do to go back to the moon as a test pilot, because this would be a flight test for what we're going to do when we go to Mars. We're only 3 days away, 3 or 4 days away. There are going to be shortcomings, there are going to be problems, there are going to be malfunctions. Have we all seen the movie The Martian? You better be prepared for a whole lot of anomalies and a whole lot of different things coming your way. You better have a lot of backup systems in place. It makes all the sense in the world to do really a flight test for going to Mars by going back to the moon.
And Franklin, you're building a rocket engine to take us to Mars in 39 days. What do you think about us going back to the moon first?
Well, we got to test that rocket on the moon. That's the only place where we can test it. It's a plasma engine. The exhaust is 5 million degrees. You know, right? There's no place on the Earth that we could test this rocket. We have a prototype of this engine, which is much smaller, operates at about a couple hundred kilowatts. The Mars rocket would be 10 megawatts, so much more powerful. The engine we're testing in our facility in Houston runs now steady state continuously. We've run it for tens of thousands of shots, and up to a week continuous firing. But we now want to take it into space and demonstrate it in space. And so this is something our company is preparing to do in about 4 years from now. We're building 2 prototypes of these, of the flight engine. But ultimately, what you want to do is to test an engine at 10 megawatts, which is about the power of one of the engines in a 737, jet, right? One of the turbines. That type of engine is what a Mars vehicle will need to deliver a crew to Mars in a couple of months. And one thing that you have to kind of appreciate is the challenge of going to Mars is very different from the challenge of going to the moon. I mean, the moon is always at the same distance from the Earth, 3 days away. And so when you go to the moon, you really are still on Earth orbit, in a sense. You really haven't left Earth orbit. When you go to Mars, it's a whole another story. Imagine, I usually use this analogy. If you can picture an orange, I mean, you got oranges here in Florida. So you picture an orange, and that orange is the sun. Then the Earth would be a pinhead right there, right where Bill is sitting, right in the front row here. The size of a pinhead. Imagine a little pinhead. And then Mars would be, another pinhead would be, closer to the door out there. And these, these pinheads are moving around, the orange, and the Earth, the one closest to us takes a year to go around. The other one in the back takes 2 Earth years to go around. So if you are going to fly from, Bill to the door, the little pinhead to the other one, and it takes you a year to get there, you want to launch before that pinhead gets to the door. And if you do make it and land, then by the time you land, because it took you about a year, then the Earth will be on the other side of the sun compared to Mars. The 2 pinheads would be on opposite sides of the orange. Okay, now it's time to come back. You see the problem. You got this hot thing right in front of you. So you have to wait. And that's what ends up happening. And that is the problem, that we cannot get there fast enough in order to prevent the planets from being lined up. And so you want to develop a transportation capability that can deliver you to Mars in a short time compared to the time it takes to the Earth to go around. Okay. And that's the key. Yeah.
That's another good reason. I want to ask General Bolden, is there a reason for us to get to the water on the South Pole before the Chinese do?
No. I mean, I'm the contrarian. We've been there. So the argument about wanting to be the first is fallacious. We will get to the water as long as we can. What we have to work on is what we call conventions or norms of behavior, where nobody owns anything. So I'm not one who believes that the first person who gets back there is going to own everything. The moon's a pretty big place. But that's not my point. My point is, as the contrarian, I have a concern about going to the moon the way that we're talking about going now. I think it's important to go there, but not as a you know, we could go to Mars without going to the moon. My concern is that we'll go to the moon and we'll take up homage there. And people talk about colonizing and stuff like that. That's a long stay, which means you'll never get to Mars. Humans will never go to Mars. And we've got to, I think we do have to think realistically sometimes. You know, we're trying to figure out what NASA's budget's going to be right now. So we need to have a long-range plan that says, okay, how long are we going to stay on the lunar surface before we get our act together and press on to Mars? I would be very happy if we would talk about Moon and Mars collectively. And we're not, NASA's trying to do that, but you haven't seen anyone do that yet. So that's my contrarian view. I want to go to Mars, and I don't want us to get stuck on the moon, because the moon has no atmosphere. The moon is not like Earth. Neither is Mars, to be quite honest, but we believe that at one time, you know, Mars was like Earth. There is no hope that we're going to find life on the surface of the moon. There is great hope that we'll find signs of life on Mars. And as a person of faith, it's really important for me to find life somewhere else in this universe, because that I'm always looking for proof. I'm a practicing Christian. We have no proof of my faith. So I'm looking for one more little scintilla of proof of this person or thing that we call an omnipotent God. If I can find some life somewhere else in this universe other than this one planet, that's not proof, but it's one more piece of evidence for me as a person of faith. So whatever.
So if we talked about the three issues that Charlie has just raised, we'd be here all afternoon.
Did not intend to do that, and I was hoping we would give the audience an opportunity to ask some questions too.
And
so,
we are,
yeah,
we are, but we're going to take that as a stepping off point. And the question is, what is out there in this universe? And we are just now beginning to really have an understanding, almost new understandings every day because of our telescopes. First with Hubble, that some of you probably launched or either tended to repair. And now this incredible James Webb Space Telescope that is positioned 1 million miles from Earth, on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun, always looking out into the dark of the universe as we circle the sun every 365 days. And the James Webb is bringing us unbelievable discoveries. And I want you to see the first photograph that came back from James Webb. No, go two before that. All right, all right, that one. That, in the lower left side, is a little red dot that is the formation of a galaxy 13.5 billion years ago. That is the reach of this infrared spectrum telescope. And it is bringing us discoveries now. 13.5 billion years ago is only 300 million years after the very beginning. And the very beginning is 13.8 billion years ago as a result of a NASA scientist who got the Nobel for discovering that. And we are reaching back in time, and we are now building telescopes that build on this one, if they don't get canceled. One that is built ready to go that needs to complete the testing, called Nancy Grace Roman, another NASA scientist. And with that and a future one, a habitable worlds, we're going to be able to determine exoplanets that have the right chemistry and that's in the Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold, that could have life on it. In the meantime, we're trying to figure out how to get 32 titanium-sealed, cigar-sized tubes of Martian soil that have been drilled from our rover, Perseverance, that's moving around a dry lake bed and up a riverbed. And if we can get those tubes back to find out, is there evidence that there was life on Mars, on a lake and a river, billions of years ago? And so what Charlie has opened is the age-old question, are we alone? My personal belief is that when you think that we're looking at a universe and we are observing the formation of galaxies 13.5 billion years ago, now think how big that is. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second. That light has been traveling at that speed for 13.5 billion years to get to here. That is a long distance. And my simpleton approach to this is, in a universe that big, can there be other life as we know it? Maybe it doesn't look like us. And I think my personal opinion is yes. All right, I want to wrap up a couple of things here. I want you to see the next picture that is where stars are born, and it's from James Webb. This is a mix of gas and dust, and we call it a star nursery. And that gas and dust swirls around, and gravity starts to take over, and it spits out new stars. At the same time, stars in the universe are dying, and they're imploding, and they're going into black holes where the energy is so strong it absorbs the light. That is what's happening out there in the cosmos. The final thing that I want to leave with you, and then we want you to give us some questions. One of the great honors I had was on the 60th anniversary of the famous speech by President Kennedy. The Kennedy family have told me that they think that his two most famous speeches, one was his inaugural, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." But the second one that they say is, they think, his most important speech. He went after John Glenn had flown in orbit. We finally caught up to the Soviets. And it's now September, after Glenn flew in April. And the nation is really buzzed up about the space program. And Kennedy had already made his declaration that we're going to the moon and return safely in the decade. And he says in Rice Stadium, we go to the moon and do other things, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Rice University had a 60th anniversary, and they asked the head of NASA to come and speak. I want you to see what came out of this, and this is less than 2 minutes. Please roll the video. Throughout America's story, there are defining days. Days when minds change, hearts fill, and imaginations soar. Days when visions transform the trajectory of the American story, which is our story. Doing what is hard and achieving what is great, that is what stirs humankind. That's what unites us. With inspiration and innovation, No Herculean effort is too large. No moonshot is beyond our reach.
And liftoff of Artemis 1.
A new generation, the Artemis generation, stands ready. Ready to return humanity to the moon and then to take us further than ever before to Mars. Let us continue the quest to unfold this universe. And let us continue to find unity in our discovery. So together, let us continue to dream the impossible dream that now becomes real. Then let us traverse the untouched terrain of the once unreachable stars. Okay, you all are the Artemis generation. The Apollo generation was a half century ago. So students here, you of the Artemis generation, ask your questions. Okay, stand up so I can see you. All right, the lady first.
My story is real quick. I suffer from the imposter syndrome. I always have, and I still do, and I'm very proud of it. But I met Dr. Ron McNair, one of the 3 black astronauts who was selected in Ray and Hoot's class. And I was a test pilot at the time, and you know, Ron and I commiserated over the weekend, and when he got ready to go back to Houston, he asked me if I was going to apply for the space program. And I said, not on your life. And he looked at me real strange, and he said, why not? And I said, they'd never pick me. And he said, you know, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. And he said, how do you know if you don't ask? And I was embarrassed. I mean, I felt about that big because my mom and dad had invested their entire life on me, telling me that I could do anything I wanted to do. And I had forgotten that. So, I mean, every once in a while, you have to remember what you're told, what we've said, and just go for it. I mean, if you don't make it, so what? Try again, and again, and again. So that's my experience.
And don't ever count yourself out. Don't ever say, they're not going to pick me. I'm not going to apply for it. Don't do that to yourself.
Okay, the gentleman right here.
Hello, thanks so much for being here today. We heard about the 7 astronauts on board the space station, but following that, it might come down to 3. I'm a medical student here, so it's great to see some doctors here, and I'm thinking about the medical emergency we're seeing aboard the International Space Station, and while we hope that's going well, I'm wondering on the ethics of how that's going to change as we go back to the moon and into deep space.
Who wants to take that?
I'll take it, you know, because nobody else wants to. There is an ethics, NASA, believe it or not, I found this out when I was the administrator. We have an ethics review panel. And we call upon them anytime we're going to make a critical decision to make sure that we're not just making an engineering decision or something else. And so we had, I'll give you the one example that came up, and it was a question of whether or not we could fly a woman for a 3rd time on the International Space Station because it would cause that person to exceed the medical limits on exposure to radiation in low Earth orbit. And we took it to the ethics review panel, and their decision was, we're not changing the rule, but there is an aspect that you need to consider, and that is fairness, and that the person that you're protecting has the right to an opinion. And so, you know, should we, in all of our brilliance and brightness, decide for that person that that's not something that they should be allowed to do, if they give you justification and tell you why they understand everything, it's called advised consent. And the decision we made was that we were going to fly that person, and we did, and worked out.
The lady back there.
Thank you. I had a couple questions, but I'll ask my favorite one. What would you say, well, because astronauts, as I've always heard and seen, practice so many emergency protocols. They practice protocols upon protocols upon protocols when you're up there doing a launch sequence, doing your experiments, and doing all of your landing sequences. What would you say would be an ethical protocol for people to practice and always like have on hand?
Well, when I was privileged to try to run NASA, I always asked the question, what's the right thing to do? And I usually, the answer came pretty clearly. What's the right thing to do? I think you've heard in the discussion today, in many situations, what's the right thing to do? To be respectful to others, to treat them fairly. As a matter of fact, somebody said, treat others as you want to be treated yourself. Interestingly, that has a familiar ring in Old English. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You've heard so much preparation, practice, keep the North Star, safety. Always you're going to have a question in life, whether it's running a spaceship or running your life. What's the right thing to do? And that's where your ethics, your morals come in. And you'll always be confronted with those kind of questions. All right, the gentleman right there.
So my question is that we see that there are multiple propulsion technologies in space, but do you think that space medicine and space pharmaceutics is ready to support astronauts in long-term space missions? And a completely unrelated question, but very, very, very important for us young people, how do you find such beautiful, amazing life partners, and how do you build this beautiful relationship? We want to know your secret.
All right, is space medicine ready to support life out in space? Who wants to take that? One of you medical doctors? Peggy?
There are a couple of folk here in the audience who might even have a better answer than we do. I happen to believe that because of experimentation we've been doing, stuff like protein crystal growth, pharmaceuticals development, we didn't talk about what about future space stations. My hope is that one of the earliest future space stations will be an untended, no people on it platform that's doing nothing but pharmaceuticals development. There are a number of companies around the world that are doing this kind of stuff. We've got people right here in the audience who are doing that kind of stuff. I would ask somebody who's currently involved in it, what are we smoking a pipe, a bad pipe, or are we going to get to do that? Some of that stuff's going on right here at the University of Florida. Nobody? Okay, that's all right. We don't have an answer for that.
All right. You fabulous life partners want to answer the question, the second question? No takers on that. Well, I could be glib and say I married above myself, but I really did. And I'm just very fortunate. All right, the young lady there.
Hi. Okay. It's amazing to be able to speak to y'all. So I just want to preface one of my questions with I obviously love space, and I see a lot of merit in space travel. But I also like the life and exploration we have on this Earth. So my first question is, how do y'all engage with traveling to other planets and space exploration in a way that doesn't make it feel like we're trying to leave Earth behind?
As a matter of fact, when I went to space, I discovered Earth. And an extension of that is we've got a couple of dozen spacecraft up there right now that is measuring in great specificity what is happening to the Earth. So much more so that we know what is happening and we can mitigate against it if we can get our politics right on the face of the Earth. So is the Earth heating up? You bet it is. And we can tell you precisely. We now, for some time, we've known the temperature of the ocean is rising, and we measure that from space. We can tell you the temperature of the rivers and the lakes and the streams from another spacecraft, even reservoirs, and therefore predict how that's going to, through evaporation, lessen. We can tell you about the platelets of the Earth from space and how they're moving and how that's going to affect life. The ability to project here in Florida hurricanes by being very specific where they're going to hit and with what ferocity, unless the science is canceled up there, as it was threatened to do earlier this year, canceling 50% of NASA's science. I think the Congress is going to restore most of that, which is a good thing. That tells you institutions are starting to function as they should as a check and balance. And so I think we go to space and we learn in order to learn about us and the Earth. Okay, this gentleman over here.
Wait, I'm just so curious. I'm so sorry. With the talk of going back or going to Mars, is there any talk about retrieving the Opportunity rover that got abandoned there? I'm serious. I love him, so I just want him to come back home.
The short answer would be very possibly.
All right. Well, I guess this question is kind of based on like a lot of things going on in just life right now and the future looking to it. There's a lot of uncertainties, there's a lot of threats, and you know, life can feel very shaky, and I'm sure you guys can relate to that in the time that you grow up and you became successful, maybe because of that, maybe in spite of that. But I want to harken back to one of the questions you talked about earlier, which was I guess like humility, and you talked about how important it is for a leader to be humble always, and I was really inspired by that, and that meant a lot to me. But I wonder, how do you build healthy confidence in a world that is so uncertain without letting that slip into arrogance? And also, how do you deal with failure? I think you guys are all very just great people, men and women, and I think I just want to learn from you. And yeah,
we all have failures in our lives, and you have to learn from them, and hopefully you would do things so that you don't repeat the same failure. Now, in many ways, what we did with Challenger, we did once again with Columbia. We ignored things that were going on and let them continue and didn't go after the problem and fix it. But we're all going to have setbacks, and I've had setbacks. I had a lot of problems with Physics 1 initially, and of course that was really important. And so I said, I'm going to have to work extra hard to get through physics, but you know what? It can be done. And you just have to reapply yourself and don't give up. The world was in a lot of turmoil back when I was in college. We kind of touched on it a little bit. The Vietnam War was tearing the country apart. Franklin alluded to it when he came over here to the U.S. There's always going to be turmoil. We're always going to have those things. Don't let it stop you, and don't let it get you down.
Thank you very much.
All right, I'm going to give time for 2 more questions because we're at the adjournment hour, and the next half hour we're supposed to be meeting with students. So which 2 want it, since there are about 7 of you standing? Okay. Since you've got a NASA t-shirt on, I'm going to call on you.
I had to represent. So I just want to ask you guys super quickly, what do you feel like is missing from NASA and the space industry at the moment that we as students and the Artemis generation could bring?
Well, you're the future. You're the Artemis generation. Just think, in your lifetime, you're going to find out if there's life out there in the universe. That's a pretty big discovery. If we could ever get those titanium tubes back from the surface of Mars, we'd have a pretty good idea. And then if there was life on Mars, what happened to it? And what could we learn from that to be better stewards of our own planet? So I think the Artemis generation is going to be one of the most exciting times. If politics will not blow us up, and that's a constant threat, then I think it's Katie bar the door.
Can I answer kind of more directly your question? You and the other folk in here, you are the solution to what's going on. You got to vote, you've got to engage, you've got to speak up, even though you may fear that you're going to be ostracized or something like that, because at some time, everyone on this stage, every one of us did that. And we didn't think it was any courageous action. We just thought it was necessary. And we live in a time now where it's absolutely necessary that we become active citizens of this country. Franklin's worried about Costa Rica. I'm worried about the United States. And I think the reason we're worried is because we're afraid that you all may not become actively engaged in our government and preserve our way of life, our democracy. It's up to you guys.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And you're going to have to seek a source of news that is accurate.
Yeah. Easier said than done, but.
All right, who's the last? All right, you pick them.
You can yell it, or just go take Senator Nelson's mic, real quick. Quick. There you go. Got to be decisive.
So I wanted to ask you guys, how do you balance a progressive risk posture where you're actually innovating with preventing kind of go fever? Obviously, that kind of go fever is what killed the astronauts on Apollo 1, where you cut corners, you ignore things that you probably shouldn't have. So how do you stop that while also trying to push boundaries?
Good question.
No. Well, the way I did it was I didn't make a decision until I'd heard from everybody in the room that had an opinion. Andy is another Marine, and Andy knows that in the Marine Corps, you really want to hear from PFC Banats before you go do something, because the PFC is the person who's going to be out front. As a general, I'm 1,000 miles in the rear, so you really want to listen to your people. And if they have a question about something, I'm certain Bill did this when he was a NASA administrator. I remember one specific time when we had a young engineer who wasn't even involved in shuttle, but he was concerned about our decision to bring an orbiter home without repairing a blanket on a pod, on an OMS pod on the orbiter. And we brought the young engineer in to express his concerns and put him together with some of the experts. The administrator did this just last week with concerns over the heat shield on Orion. It's transparency and involving everybody who has an opinion, and at some time you've got to make a decision, but trying to get as much input as you can from your team,
I've said the same thing a number of times. When I first was selected to be chief astronaut, my first thought was, what a tremendous honor this is. I am so thrilled. My second thought was, you know what? I don't think I'm smart enough. I don't have all the answers. I'm going to have to get my branch chiefs to tell me what they think. I'm going to ask all my mission commanders for their input. And like Charlie said, once I've heard from everybody, then I can make an intelligent decision.
I had 2 life or death decisions, and I did exactly what both of them said. I did not stop asking questions to try to get to what was the most reasonable solution. And in one case, I sought out the people that it was going to affect and got their opinion as well. And that's how I resolved it and was able to make the final decision. I didn't see anybody go to sleep. Thank you all for being so terrific. Thank you.
Well, wow, what an afternoon, and thank you so very much. I'm so grateful to all of you for having chosen to be with us and to celebrate this important anniversary with us in the way that you have. We're grateful. I was just saying how grateful we are that they chose to celebrate their anniversary here with us, and the insight and the strong example that they have provided to us of ethical leadership. As we conclude, as Bill mentioned, those of you who are students, not just UF students, but students from any other institutions, we're meeting in the conference room across the hall, so you'll have a brief meet and greet with our panelists. And as we conclude, for the rest of you, I just want to thank you for coming, for participating. We're very appreciative of the opportunity to present these events as part of the Nelson Initiative on Ethics and Leadership. And we're grateful for the partnership of our campus colleagues, especially the Estrellas team. We look forward to welcoming you to future programming, and we appreciate your continued support and investment in the University of Florida. Please join me in a final round of applause for our panelists.